Hello, everyone. Welcome to SIG Cloud Provider on Friday, July 24th, 2020. Just a reminder, everybody, to this meeting is recorded, so follow the community standards and be nice to everyone. So let's take a look at our agenda today. It looks like the first item on our agenda is a pull request by Andrew about adding an experimental V2 provider. Andrew, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I know in some past meetings, I kind of floated this idea around about possibly just like starting on a clean slate, the new provider version, where we could kind of take all the good parts of the existing provider implementation, and then maybe like reevaluate some of the parts that we don't like about it, make all the breaking changes we want, and then see if there's an appetite for it for the as an only out of tree implementation. And so I don't even know myself if this is a good idea yet, but I did want to kind of just run with the idea, get like a working alpha implementation in the current external repo, and see where it goes. And so this PR is basically just the boilerplate code just to get like the new version wired in, and then I'd like to incrementally like start working on this V2 provider and kind of see where it goes. Any thoughts?
So I do like this idea a lot. Maybe I should share my screen. Oh, it looks like it's disabled. Justin, are you able to share screen?
I will make you, sorry, I didn't make you guys hosts, so then you probably can't do it. Just give me a second, I'm sorry. You should now be able to share your screen because you are a co-host, and I'll make everyone else a co-host as
well. Okay, you can see my Firefox window here.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, Andrew. So I just wanted to also bring up other possibilities. I do like this idea a lot. The other things that we could do to sort of, because I think one of the reasons why I like this idea is because it unblocks people. And there was conversation. I was just catching up with this. There was conversation a little while ago, maybe a month ago, about some folks from Netflix who have some features they want to get in. I think the node names is one of them that they have a patch for. They're carrying a patch on their cloud provider for. So one is we try to shepherd them and get that into upstream, which, as Andrew's pointed out, there's been, it can be a slow process, but I think so. If we decide to go that way, we can, we can put some effort there. The other one is obviously this V2 provider, and the other one is just making the switch, like trying to quickly make the switch over to like actually copy the code over and deprecate the version upstream sooner rather than later. Andrew, do you see those as alternatives, or do you see possibility for this V2 provider and making the switch sooner, or
yeah, so I want to make it clear that the existence of a V2 would not imply removal or deprecation of V1. So we are going to remove V1 in tree, but we should probably forever support the V1 version out of tree also. I know that I know there's been past conversations around like the node name one and like the ELB naming, like those are kind of like really tricky things to solve, especially when you start thinking about how do I get an existing cluster onto this new naming thing. And I think I'm at a point where I've seen enough issues to say, like, I think we should just declare bankruptcy on those things, because, like, I'm sure it's possible, but they seem really hard to do right. And like, I worry that there's a lot of users we're going to break along the way. And because we're already in this weird, like, out of tree transition, and admittedly, like, the AWS provider is a little behind compared to the other providers. So I want to kind of get things kickstarted. And I think this V2, I think doing an experimental V2 is either going to show us two things. The first one being, like, this is the right way to do it. And if we can make this V2 shiny enough, like, it'll get us kind of get started on get more people adopting external. Or we'll find that it wasn't worth it, and it actually would be worthwhile to just, like, put all the effort into the existing provider and figure out the migration semantics and get it working there. So I think overall for me, I don't think it's going to be possible to do this in the existing one. And I think we should only reevaluate it if we're finding that this new V2 thing is not working.
I think looking at this, like, I certainly understand the motivation. I do have concerns about sort of, like, fragmentation, like, that we're going to create these two things. It's going to be confusing that they have different behaviors. I like very much the idea of saying, let's do a breaking change in some, like, opt-in way and not worry about compatibility, and then say, like, okay, like, is it good? Can we get there? Is it worth getting there? Is it worth, like, you know, those sort of things. I don't know that we can't do that in tree, to be honest, if you're willing to say, or in the existing location, if you're willing to say, like, you know, pass the V2 environment variable or use a different image name or something like that, and you get that behavior. There is a lot of, like, very subtle code in the V1 like, provider. And honestly, I don't, like, the two things you cited, I don't think you're going to solve them by just doing it differently. Like, the naming thing, we almost could do now. That problem is not about existing nodes, I don't think. That's more about, like, plumbing through the node object in more places. And the ELB, or the load balancer name, again, I think the problem there is if you have an annotation or something, what happens when someone changes the annotation is, I think, like, one of the issues. I guess you could say we could have a mode where you can have a mode where, like, the name is derived from the namespace and the name of the service, or the service. I actually like, so I like the idea of experimenting. I suggest we do that by trying to just do it in the existing cloud provider, just because I'm worried about what happens when we have these two cloud providers. That is a, never mind the V1, V2 thing. Like, imagine there were two cloud providers for GCP. Like, let's just, like, take someone else. Like, that is just going to cause, like, confusion for those Kubernetes users.
I think it'll be confusing if we don't document it. I think if we document it, it'll be fine, right? Like, we can say, like, hey, like, these are the options to pass it to these flags. V1 is exactly what is in tree, but the out of tree version, and V2 is a completely breaking thing. You only apply it on a new cluster, and here's documentation on what changed and what's different. So I don't see that as a problem.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think if I would be supportive of this if you wanted to try, like, having having a flag on that just, like, turned off, like, huge sections, or replaced huge sections of the in-tree provider code. Like, that to me feels very doable as well. But, like, when we've tried to have two branches, it's sort of not gone well in the past. So I'm like, having
it's kind of like a release branch. You know, you have the like, if we make the commitment that it's not we're not going to treat it as two different forks that get equal time and equal development, and we treat it as the idea being we want to move on to V2. We, new development goes on V2. V2 really is where we want to go, and then bug fixes when V1 allows us to have that transition from out of tree to in tree whenever we want to. We don't have to rush that just to get new development into this repo. Is that kind of the benefits that you see, Andrew?
Yeah, exactly. And we don't even have to go as far to say that we're not going to add new features in the existing one. Maybe that's something we can reevaluate later. But like, adding to Justin's point, I'm hesitant to start adding like various flags and toggles in the existing provider to like start turning off and turning on different behaviors, because that's going to be a bunch of changes in tree, which we're trying to avoid. Like we're trying to avoid churn in the in-tree provider, because the current V1, like the V1 outer tree is just importing the in-tree implementation, right?
Do we care if the in-tree provider churns if we don't, like, if there's code churn, but not like, it's like a different code path? I don't think we would object to that. I wouldn't object to that. I don't know.
Like I don't think we want any of the legacy in-tree providers to start adding new code paths with new features or new like feature gates or toggles or things like that, right? Like that's supposed to already be deprecated. And at some point, like we should cut the tie from vendoring in the staging repo and just vendor it in here, right? So unless we're willing to do that cut now, like I don't feel good about having all this churn in KK and then pulling it into here. So that's one factor of it. The second one is like, if we're gonna make breaking changes, right? Like in like plumbing, like the implementing the cloud provider interface is not that hard, right? And like, I don't like, to me, like the amount of work involved in adding new toggles and flags in the existing provider, and just like doing it this way, where you just pass in a new provider name and implement a different thing. Like to me, that's the same level of complexity. And I think from a user experience perspective, it's much better because they just have to toggle one flag as opposed to like different flags for different behaviors of the provider. I think that's just too complicated. So like, so I'm not saying, I don't think we need to agree on like, we should do V2 now, but what I would like to say is, what I would like to get agreement on is, let's run with that experimental V2 provider. Like it's non-binding, we can delete it at any point, but let's see where it goes. Let's see what changes we can break, and maybe at some point we'll compare like V1 and V2, and we can kind of do an analysis on whether it be possible to converge V1 into this new V2 thing without breaking users.
That does sound so tactically. We're still going to vendor V1, still going to copy V1 from KK into the cloud provider AWS repo.
It's not copying, it's an actual like vendor import.
Okay, cool. And so the V1, if I use the cloud provider AWS in the V1 mode, I use the vendored version. And if I use V2, I get the new code.
Yeah.
That sounds. And we always have the option in V1 of, in V2 of referencing any V1 code we want to, or copying.
Yes.
Manually copying it. Or,
yeah.
Yeah, I like this idea, just because I think it will unblock us from, the mental block of like, we don't want to do a bunch of stuff in KK, but it'll give us a kind of a clean slate to get some momentum going. So, and I think maybe, Justin, to alleviate your concerns of confusing users with two different versions to use, what if we call it V2 alpha or something for now, until we say, okay, enough people have experimented with it, we've figured out most of the issues, and we want to fully recommend it as the way to move forward, then we call it V2 or something like that.
Yeah, I think that can work, or AWS-Next or something like that. But yeah, I like that. I think yeah, let's try it. There is more subtlety in there, I think, than I think you might expect. But I'm in favor of doing that. Like, I would certainly start by implementing. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what happens. I would have probably like kept. Looks like they're returning nil right now. I would have kept them returning the V1 ones and like start replacing them one at a time. But let's see where it goes.
Yeah, and we may end up doing that. Like, I literally just didn't know because I wasn't sure which direction to go. But
yeah, and most of these we don't need. But yes, I think it's good. I think there's also there's also an open question of like, should load balancer actually be, I guess it doesn't matter. There was a debate about whether we should have put NLB into the AWS Cloud Provider, or whether we should have said, look, if you turn on NLB or ELB-v2, like it should have just like done nothing, and we could have had an external controller do it. I guess that's very much the same. We've covered that now. We have got the external cloud controller manager. Like, I don't think we want to start doing granularity. Like, I want AWS Cloud Provider for my instances or my nodes, but like something else for my load balancer.
So,
yeah, I need to think about that.
So you're saying just separate the load balancer behavior out from the cloud provider?
When it was in tree, there was like very valid suggestions that probably we should have done that. And a lot of people like want to use load balancer, want to change one thing, as we know from the annotations. Like, it might have been nice to have something more like ingress there, like a richer thing there. But
yeah, like one option is part of the initialize call on line 45. We can just run a per load balancer type controller. So like, instead of implementing load balancer, we just run, one ELB controller, one NLB controller, and run with that possibly.
All right. I like the idea of experimenting and seeing like, can we solve the naming issue? That'll be a good one. For example, the node naming issue, I think, is probably lower hanging fruit than the other one. So yeah, I'm okay with that. I feel like, yeah, and so this is only going to be in the external cloud controller manager. So that's fine, because it's just sort of like, anyone in the community could create the same thing, right? Like there will be other cloud controller managers. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think kind of my hidden angle to all this is like, if we make the like when there's a lot of feature requests for the current provider, right? So like, if we have an external only one, and we see this feature requests in tree, we can say like, oh, look at this shiny thing. You have to, use out of tree though. And that'll fix, like, we could, like, this feature is implemented is just out of tree. And so I'm hoping that kind of moves the needle along for other efforts.
Is storage in here? I'm sorry. Just sorry. Oh, because that's CNI now. Okay, never mind. Cool.
So for users that want, or contributors that want to make changes now, what is the story that we tell them? Where to propose it?
For the new provider that we're talking about,
or just in general, like the Netflix node patch, what should happen with that?
I think it depends on their timeline, and it depends on how quickly this V2 gets up and running. I think we just say, hey, I mean, I think it's likely that we'll get the V2 up and running, in a similar sense, at least in an alpha state, in a few weeks. So if if they're willing to contribute to it, then I think we recommend that.
I think we probably also tell them. I think that's a good thing about like how likely it is to get into the core, the in-tree provider in a timely way. Like that's going to be in the V1, and I think I like the emphasis on timeline. And it seems like you'll be able to get it into the V2 alpha very quickly, presumably. And that's actually a good step to getting into V1 if we can, in that, like, you know, show it working in there, and then we have it in both, which will also be nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it's a bug fix to V1, then presumably they should do it in V1, or if it's that sort of thing. And I presume like the ongoing annotations on load balancers will mostly go into V1, and we can address what we want to do in V2 in a separate design discussion.
Yeah, I think like, yeah, like another conversation we can have with the V2 is like, should we support like CRDs for, you know, the AWS provider? So like one use case is like, should there be like an ELB class resource where we just reference that from the service instead of all these random annotations? Like those are new things we can experiment with.
And I'm very much in favor of something exactly like that. Like, you know, we've seen this with Ingress and Ingress v2, and like GCLB, Google Cloud Load Balancer, was using Ingress v1, but ended up with a sidecar, something like a storage class, effectively like a sidecar CRD that would describe like the GCLB extensions to Ingress. And yeah, it seems like that is in every access superior to annotations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say I would recommend we embrace CRDs because of what you were hinting at, which is versioning. Like versioning annotations is difficult to impossible. So and it's built into CRDs.
And yeah, the list goes on. Storage class also you can share between, like, so you can have like a limited set, and you can delegate responsibility on the storage class without delegating all responsibility on, you know, you can like split the RBAC permissions. So that's, yeah, I agree.
I pasted in chat a link to a comment from someone at AWS that mentions they're proposing they have the official ALB ingress controller, but they're proposing a more generic AWS load balancer controller that would cover NLBs as well. I don't know how that could coexist, or if that affects decisions about the provider itself.
Okay. VIP mode.
The last paragraph, mostly.
Got it. Yeah, I had asked Yang, who's one of my coworkers, who's working on networking aspects of Cloud Provider, to join this meeting. I'll see if he can come next time. I think he couldn't make it this week, but they're working on this, a proposal for this. So I'll see if he is willing to come share it next week. I don't know too much about it yet.
If it's incompatible in terms of what it needs to do, it might be nice to have, like, the storage class analogy could hold, in that you have a reference to a storage class which is not the one we expect, not one of our built-in ones, and we say, that's some other controller is obviously doing this, so we'll back off and we'll do nothing effectively.
Yeah, the idea of like, because like right now service controller just watches all service type LVs. There was some conversations about like, should there be a generic ignore the service annotation for the cloud provider? So maybe that's worth discussing more broadly.
And we're gonna have to talk with SIG networking as well.
Yeah. So can I get a LGTM on that PR, and then we can. I'll probably have like a PR per interface implementation, and then I'll do frequent status updates for folks here on the call. Thanks.
I will add those once I figure out how to sign in. I'll also LGTM it.
Anything else on that one?
Nope, that was it.
Cool. So I LGTM'd. The next one is just bumping to 1.18.6. I LGTM'd that. Pull request of yours, Andrew.
Yeah.
So
thanks.
we'll
And then
need. Go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say we'll need a 1.18 and 1.19 release branches.
Yeah. Yeah, we should cut. We should
So
cut that at some point.
yeah. Is there any reason we shouldn't do that now?
I think only because like 119 wasn't released yet, but I mean, there's nothing saying we could still like pull the branch in and test with it. So I could take that.
I guess like we could create a 118 release branch and then have like a 119 alpha in master or something like that.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, and then so actually right after you approved that one PR, I actually ended up cutting the new release tag for alpha.1, and then I pushed the image already, and I need approval on the manifest change. So that's pull request 116.
Okay. Okay, so is that everything for that item?
Yep.
Cool. I just wanted to, I was looking at there's an existing, we have 2 tests right now for this repo in Prow, or 2 pre-submits, I guess I should say. And they're just really simple. They're just, one of them is like a make check, which does like go vet, go lint, go funct. And then the other one is like a make test. Are you giggling at my pronunciation of funct?
You did it very artfully. I was like, wow. That was good.
So I was thinking we could conceivably also just have a pre-submit that just, I think I saw this in the GCE config, like just run some, Kubernetes ETE or something on kops with kops configured to use the external cloud provider. So I saw that kops supports external cloud provider to some degree. So you can, I think Sid, WLAN 0 has a blog post of like how there's like a couple tricky corner cases where you have to like add stuff to the API server config and the controller manager config. So I was just sort of following that. Does that sound like a reasonable approach to you guys? Am I going down the right path there?
Yes. We also can add what you described is like the power user mode, where you can essentially change any flag you want to in kops, and so you can, it's not entirely true, but you can more or less do anything you want. We also have like higher level abstraction flags, and we should probably add one for using the AWS external cloud provider. In the meantime, it's very reasonable to do it your way. I did click on the link. I didn't see, those are the 2 jobs we have today, right?
Yeah.
They aren't the new, yeah, okay. It may prove easier to simply add the higher level flag. I don't know. But yes, what you've described sounds very reasonable.
Yeah, no, I have no problem adding that to cops. So I can start with adding.
I'm also happy to help on that however I can. I'm sure other people will be as well.
Cool. Yeah, I'll ping you
Yeah.
as I need help. I'll add a note here.
We're always trying to have, this could be this could be a good add-on actually. We're always trying to figure out, or I'm always trying to figure out how to sneak add-ons in. Peter's smiling. So like, I wonder if I can sneak add-ons in this way. But yes, we're starting to add like the ability to, so currently all manifests for things that we install automatically are sort of baked into the kops tree, the kops binary, kops source code tree, and then the kops binary. And I am trying to get that so that it can pull from external locations or easily pull from external locations, be they cluster add-ons or other things. And I can't remember exactly how much of that we've got in so far, but I will push on that as well.
Gotcha. Cool.
There's a feature, kops has a feature flag to enable external cloud controller manager support. I don't know if enabling that when you create a cluster will configure the external cloud provider for whichever provider you choose, or if you still need to do that separately.
Yeah, so according to Sid's post, as it was written a while ago, it's not enough. You have to do this other configuration along with it. So maybe just combining all of those into just one flag.
Yeah, honestly, I think it makes sense that if the feature flag is set, then we should do everything that you need to do to get it working automatically in the manifest. So if we can look at that blog post, can you add a link to that, to the agenda, so we can take a look?
Yeah,
and then
I'll
we can incorporate that into kops. I think that makes sense.
Cool. All right, that's everything we have on the agenda today. Did anyone have anything else they want to discuss while we're still recording? Cool. All right, Justin, you can stop the